I had never had a spiritual experience where it's like somebody touches you and then you fall down, that kind of thing. But it felt like that. Like it felt like a faint or something that like pushed me on the ground. And I was on my knees just like weeping, like, I'm so sorry, God. I'm so sorry that I did this. My name is Hayden. I'm a church leader who's used weed.
Hayden, thanks for coming in, man. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, man. Man, I grew up in a small town about an hour away from here in Waco. My parents raised me to serve in church. I've been a part of some sort of leadership team since I was 13, 14, doing sound or being in charge of, not in charge, but like helping out with Awanas or kids ministry, stuff like that. So I moved to Waco to go to Baylor. I was interested in ministry and learning more about the Bible and studying ministry and scripture. And that's what I devoted myself to here in Waco. And I've been living here for about 10 years. So that's like the ministry side of me. And have just enjoyed being a part of the Waco community. I don't currently serve as a vocational minister. I serve as a counselor for kids in Waco ISD, and then I also am recruiting kids to be a part of a mentorship program, recruiting individuals, community volunteers to spend time with our students. So that's kind of the avenue that I'm going right now, and then yeah, so that's I'm married here in Waco. I love living in Waco, love being a part of the community here, and just enjoy spending time with people. So,
What does it mean to be a church leader?
Man, if you asked me that question a long time ago, I'd answer it a little bit differently. But right now, what does it mean to be a church leader? It's a servant. It's someone who puts the needs of the church over their own preferences or their own desires in order to exalt the name of Jesus, and to serve and lead the church in a direction that advances the gospel.
Why do you find it necessary to talk about like weed? What is, I guess that's a weird question. That's a bad question, but tell me like your perspective of marijuana or cannabis, whatever. What's your perspective of it as a believer, as a church person? How do you view it?
Man, it's a tough one, because I simultaneously want people to understand it, and want people to just be aware of it, especially here in Texas where it's new, kind of a newer thing that could be an option for somebody. And my relationship with it, I grew up putting it on the same level as like cocaine or heroin or something that can really damage you. And knowing like the main reason that I'd like to talk about it is if there's any young minister or older minister, church leader, or any church that's curious about learning more about the relationship between cannabis. Is it even an option for a Christian to consider? Is something that I chose to look into. by using it myself.
Can you tell me about the first experience?
Yeah. First time. Let me explain kind of where I was at. I was serving as a youth leader at a church here in Waco, and through that experience, I somewhere along the way, I signed a contract that said that I would not consume alcohol in public. Didn't say that I couldn't have it at all, but it needed to be in my own home. And so I had just turned 21, was really curious about alcohol. Nobody, everyone said, like, you can't get drunk, but you can have a beer. And then there were other Christians that said, no, you can't touch it. So I went on the side of like, oh, I can touch it but not get drunk. Friends would go out, would have fun, and in my mind at the time it was like, okay, I can either drink here or I've got to be sober when I'm out. And that's the box that I put myself in. So I was really looking for something else. I never signed a contract that said I wouldn't smoke weed. And so I went on a spring break trip to Washington State. The goal of the trip was not necessarily just to smoke, but I knew that cannabis was legal there. I knew I was in an environment that nobody would know that I used it. I definitely wanted to keep it a secret. So finally, to answer your question, my first experience, man, literally all I did, I smoked it, I took a shower, listened to music, I ate some pizza, had some like dessert, some ice cream, and then I watched A Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, laughed throughout that whole time, and then went to bed at like 9:45, woke up at like 8:30, felt completely rested, no hangover. It was an awesome experience, and it didn't feel like I was out of control. It didn't feel like, I didn't text somebody that I shouldn't have. I didn't like make those typical like drunk mistakes that you think about and you hear about. Like, I didn't do anything that I would have been embarrassed of the next day. Maybe I had one more piece of pizza than I normally would have, or something like that. And so in my mind, it felt very safe, felt very comfortable. I didn't have like a fear of missing out on anything. It was awesome.
Was that the case every time you smoked?
It depends who was around, but if I was alone, yeah.
Tell me about the, I guess, positives. Like, tell me about what you got out of it. Do you still currently smoke?
Yeah, I don't smoke as much. I have a medical card so I use like a 5 milligram gummy at nighttime sometimes, but it's a prescribed thing that, I get it from a doctor. So, what was the question again?
Do you have that same experience? I guess, well, I asked, that was the first one. I think the second one I asked was, like, what do you get out of it? What
Yeah.
what are the benefits from it?
It really breaks down my sense of self. And the goal of what I'm trying to explain is not necessarily to defend it. I think every Christian should take everything up to the Lord and really consider these things. But for me, especially at the time and even now, it would break down my sense of self. The first couple of times it was fun and just had a heightened experience. For someone with ADHD, those people tend to react to cannabis in a way that allows them to focus on one thing. And so watching a movie, I would basically need to get ready whatever I was about to do beforehand. Set up a movie and then smoke and then push play, and as it would kick in, I'd be hyper focused into it. There's been all kinds of crazy experiences, but probably the first one that affected me the most was I struggled with using pornography at the time, especially. And there was this one time where I was alone in my house, and I was extremely tempted to use pornography, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I'm just telling you this is what I chose to do. I chose to smoke what I had. It was about 2 hits. It didn't take that much to affect me, but I smoked the most I had ever done at that point. And I quickly started to have like a crazy, almost like psychedelic experience. And I remember sitting in my room, and I went from being tempted, like not caring at all about what sin that I was about to enter into. I didn't care about the consequences at the time. But all of a sudden, I was standing in my room right after smoking, and I look at my wall, and it's not like a visual. It's not like I saw it with my eyes, but I was able to somehow perceive every pornography video that I had ever watched in one moment. And that just like brought me down to my knees. Like, I had never had a spiritual experience where it's like somebody touches you and then you fall down, that kind of thing. But it felt like that. Like, it felt like a faint or something that like pushed me on the ground. And I was on my knees just like weeping, like, I'm so sorry, God. I'm so sorry that I did this, or that I even wanted to watch porn. Like, I have separated myself from you for even just desiring this. I'm so sorry. And I literally wept for 2 hours, and I couldn't get up. I tried to stand up, but I couldn't. It was like, it felt like I was trapped there in this, like, I don't know if it was shame or if it was, it just felt like I had never truly apologized to God for my sin, in that area of sin. And so eventually, like, there was this moment where I felt like it left me. It like, God said, you are forgiven. That time felt like I was waiting to get a spanking, like I was a kid, and I was waiting for my father to come in and punish me. Because I was in my room, I was like on the edge of my bed. It's that same feeling, but like so intensified. And then God said, you are forgiven, and I felt myself get up, and I just felt this desire to go outside, and I felt God say, like, okay, now go look at my beautiful creation. And I went outside, and it was sunny, and saw the sun reflecting off the grass and the flowers and everything, and it was like the first time I had ever seen it. And I started crying again, but it was tears of joy. And now, if I'm ever tempted to watch pornography, I think of that moment and I felt it was almost as able that I was able to perceive how my sin hurt God. And I know that I'm not anywhere even close to being able to perceive that. I don't think any one of us can, because we can't love as much as God can love us. So sin can't possibly hurt us as much as it does God. But I'm trying to say that I experienced a pain from my sin that I have never experienced before.
When you look back at that story, do you look at it as weed saved me from this other sin, or how do you view that now?
I believe that God used it for his glory and his good, but I would never tell someone else, like, hey, you need to smoke weed and then you'll be able to see your sin. Like, I would never tell that to somebody else. For me, like you heard what I just told you, I believe that it did open my eyes to perceive my sin, but that's what happened to me. And if there's someone out there that's struggling with their sin or being able to perceive the weight of it, I'm not here to say, smoke weed and you will be able to, because there's other ways to do that.
You know, you identified yourself as a church leader that has used weed. Why did you choose that language? Why specifically church leader? Why is that important to you?
Because there's this like higher calling aspect of being a church leader than a non-vocational minister or a Christian who serves the Lord without a vocational leadership role within a church. There just is, and rightfully so. But that's what I was doing, was leading youth in a church. And so, because I had that experience, I chose to bring some of the cannabis back with me to Texas, and it was illegal at the time. There's loopholes now. Like I said, I have my medical card now, but at the time it was illegal to use. I brought it back and talked to my roommates about it, told them my experience with it and that I would rather use this than alcohol. That was my justification at the time. I wanted to be able to tell them, like, hey, I'm using this instead of alcohol. I know I've made some mistakes with alcohol. I won't with this, and I'll still go out with you guys. I don't feel like I need to drink anymore. But I hid that from my church. That was a closeted thing. And that's where the sin started really creeping in. Regardless of, I was doing something that was illegal, but in my mind, my argument was like, so is speeding, No church minister has ever pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're speeding, like you need to ask God for forgiveness for that." There's different worldly consequences for breaking the law, and I think those consequences are there for a reason. But sin is sin, and I came up with so many arguments if somebody wanted to debate against me on this matter. But at the same time, I kept it to my chest.
You just said sin is sin. What is your definition of sin?
Missing the mark. It's anything that is not a part of God's design. Any choice we make, any thought we have, any heart posture that we have that is not aligned with God's design for us.
So, based off of the definition of sin being anything that's not in God's design, would you say that cannabis is in God's design for us?
I believe that it's a tool that God can use for His glory. I think about Paul, and when he talks about like when one of the churches is debating whether or not they can eat pork now since Christ died and resurrected, and some people were saying like, no, it's a sin to do this, and some people were saying, no, it's not. Christ freed us from that. And he talks about the weak in faith and things like that. If I'm going to use it, then I'm going to check my heart posture and where it's at, and what goals I have for using it. And if there's a minister, if there's a church leader or a Christian who says cannabis is a sin but alcohol is not, or like any sort of like substances is a sin but this other one is not, coffee, Adderall, anything that changes your state of mind, you should check why you're doing those things. I don't say this as much anymore because I think I've annoyed myself with it, but if you are a Christian and you cannot read your Bible without a cup of coffee next to you, then you should check your motives. If you are a Christian and you need maybe 1 to 2 beers before you can really get into a conversation with somebody and you're in you're drained and your cup is empty, and you need that to be able to be more intentional with this person, then you should check yourself. And these are things that I've struggled with, so that's why I'm saying it from that. Because these are ways that I've always enjoyed substances and how they alter my mind, and I feel like I can experience that even on such a small dose that I just like it. I love coffee. I love how caffeine makes me feel. It makes me feel like more intentional with the conversations that I'm having, and there are days where I purposely go without it and I have a worse experience talking to people. And so with anything, any Christian, whether you're a church leader or not, should check themselves and why they're using it, and go through periods of fasting from those things. So we fast from food, I think we should also fast from social media because that's a drug as well. Coffee, alcohol, whatever it is that ice cream, whatever it is that maybe the back part of your brain, your subconscious, is going to say, I need this, and then I can serve the Lord better. Anything.
Tell me what happened once you kind of, I guess, how did your church find out about
Yeah.
your usage?
Yeah, man. Well, all of my roommates were serving at the church I was at the time. It was a bunch of religion majors living together. It was kind of fun. I asked each of them individually if they had a problem with it because at the time there was an illegal substance in the house. And I wanted them to feel comfortable with that, or at least tolerate it. And if they didn't, I told them, like, hey, I will quit and I will throw this away and never touch it. Because of my alcohol usage at the time, they knew the difference in how I reacted to cannabis. And I think they tolerated me a lot more, or they enjoyed being around me a lot more if I was on that. And I know how it sounds right now, but that's where my heart was at the time, was like, I got to be on something.
How often was that? Like, how frequent was your usage at that point?
About twice a week. And I bought a gram from Washington, which is $10 worth. It's hard to explain how much it was. The average smoker, like if someone smokes like a blunt or a joint every day, they're going to go through 2 grams in a day. So I made that 1 gram last 3 months before everything came out. Not justifying my actions, but just trying to explain like how little I was consuming of it. It would kind of be like 1 beer or something like that. But one of my roommates decided to tell one of the ministers on staff, who was older, instead of confronting me first. I don't blame them anymore, and I still don't know who it was out of the roommates that I had. I still don't know. And I've forgiven whoever it was because I know that was a part of God's plan and worked out in the end. But yeah, just one of that church leader called me and asked me to go eat. And I thought we were about to have a fun conversation. I was like, man, this person reached out to me. Sit down immediately, and he's like, hey, I heard this. You can tell me if it's true or not. And if it's not true, we'll just pretend like this never existed and keep moving forward. Are you smoking weed? Are you using cannabis? Whew. And there was a part of me that wanted to lie. I knew that I could say no, go home, throw it away, and just never use it again and have gotten away with it, you know. I told the truth. And was fired on the spot. I had like a residency lined up. I had just graduated from Baylor with the bachelor's in religion, and I had a residency lined up with this church um, to kind of basically be like an associate youth minister role. And I was so excited to get that position, um, and that at the time I was saying that was taken from me.
At this point, is it illegal in Texas, or was it legal?
It was illegal at the time. Yeah.
What was what was communicated to you? Do you remember? Like when you said you were fired on the spot, did he communicate his reasons or anything like that?
Yeah. And again, I want to say I don't blame any of these church leaders for what they did. They just didn't know um, anything about it. But yeah, he said we need to meet. Can you meet tomorrow? We need to meet with your supervisor and the head pastor and talk this through. But you're not going to be serving at church anymore. Kind of got the same conversation the next day. After I had about 18 to 24 hours to sit on it, then I developed anger, a part of that grief, and I went into that meeting as an angry person, wanting to say, you guys don't understand. I signed a contract that I would drink at home, closet drink. I can do that I can drink as much as I want at my home as long as nobody knows about it. Is it really about optics here, or what is the deal? And I was using an illegal substance. I mean, like, I don't blame them for what they did, but they just had no idea what they were dealing with. And I'm assuming I didn't sign a contract for that because they assumed I wouldn't do that. Similar to, like, I didn't have to sign a contract that I wouldn't consume pornography, because if you're a church leader, they assume you're not doing that. And so I just developed this anger because it's like nobody's trying to understand me. I don't feel heard. I don't feel seen. I don't feel like someone's trying to understand me. And I idolized serving in the church so much that I felt like my connection to God was taken from me. And that's really what God was working on in me.
Tell me what it means to idolize serving.
Mm. When I was a kid, I thought I was so cool because I was behind the computer, like doing the slides, and all my friends were sitting in the congregation, but I had a special seat. I loved it. I loved being set apart. And the deepest part of me wanted to be recognized, to be heard, and to be noticed. And so moving to Waco, wanting to serve, there's almost like a, I hate to say this, but there's like a clout that comes with what church do you represent? What church are you serving at? What's your position there? It's like in this part of the heart of Texas, the Bible Belt, it's cool to be in church leadership. People know who you are. You will get more Instagram followers if you are a college pastor at X church. It's the truth. And I think that's better than the opposite of being persecuted. But if you're not careful, it breeds idolizing this service. Now, I loved the Lord and I still do, but I loved serving, but I also really loved how I was perceived in that moment. And I was really proud to tell people that I had a residency lined up with this church. And people would react to it in a way that I wanted them to. And I would have never admitted that because it was all subconscious thought. But now I know that that was true. And that's one of the bigger warnings that I would like to put out there for young ministers and even older ministers is like, do you fear God truly, or do you fear man? Do you want to be noticed for your service by man, or is God enough to know? If God noticed you, is that enough? And I didn't believe that.
What do you believe now?
I believe that God is everything in my service. I do have some pride creep in sometimes, and I have to pray against it. That is my biggest sin, is pride.
Do you still want to be in church leadership?
Not right now. I think there will be a day that I do. I mean, I serve as a deacon right now at my church. But I translate that to servant. I am there to serve. I am not, maybe I'm leading, but my heart posture behind it is not that I'm in charge of something or somebody.
Is your church now cool with you using cannabis?
My head pastor, I had to tell him when I moved over. One of the members at my last church made me tell him, because when I was let go at my church, which, by the way, I want to emphasize that the church I was at did not kick me out. They did not kick me out of their church. And I believe that they were doing everything they could in their knowledge and their wisdom to follow the Lord and follow what the Lord had called them to do. But I was no longer allowed to serve, and so I spent some time attending that church, but I did not serve in any kind of way, and I was so bummed through that experience. And to answer your question, I eventually did get a ministry role at a small church way outside of Waco, and that information came out to a member at the church I was at, and they called the head pastor, or my boss, and told him, and I had a meeting with him to talk about it. And what's weird, in between that time frame, cannabis, like a variant of cannabis, had come out as a legal product. And that pastor said, man, it's not my business. It kind of frustrates me that you didn't have the opportunity to tell me yourself, but I just don't want to hear about this. Just don't let me hear about it again. And I was like, all right, this is my place. You know, having a medical card and using it in that space is something that I feel comfortable with. I've never said that. You know, I've said that to a few people before, but if I ever interview for a church again, I'm just gonna tell them, because I don't want to feel like I need to hide something.
Why is it so important for you to serve in a church? Like specifically to have some sort of role?
It's not as important anymore as it was. I've already answered why it was important to me, as a part of my flesh, but serving God, and at the time serving in a church, was how I served God, and I put that in a box as far as like, this is how I serve God. For me, my role in this world is to be a church leader, to be a pastor, or to be a minister in some way. And this is how I serve God. Any other way than that, it can't happen. And I don't believe that anymore. But that is why being a church leader was so important to me.
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from? Why is it, what I hear you saying is there was a point in time where you looked at serving specifically in the walls of a church as like the highest aim that you could aim for. Like, this is the pinnacle. This is where I would be able to, like, in a way, God would love me most and I would be most used if I was in a church setting, versus just being like the other 99% of believers who serve in other contexts and serve the church, go to church, but they're not necessarily on staff. Why?
In the Bible Belt, there's this like phrase that people will ask you if you're interested in serving. Like, they say, have you thought about if you're called to ministry? And like, that phrase, called to ministry, is something that anyone who's ever been on staff at a church has had to talk about in an interview. You know, there's no one really talks about like, oh, I'm called to be a plumber, or I'm called to be a school teacher, or like, yes, that happens, but in ministry, in church leadership, there is that phrase, when did you know that you were called to ministry? And for me, my parents raised me to fear the Lord and to read my Bible and to be disciplined. And growing up, I just saw pastors as people who did that more than the average person. And I felt like I did that more than the average person. And so therefore, you know, A plus B equals C, I'm called to ministry. And so I took that and studied the word hard. I tried to memorize scripture. I just kind of went all out and wanted to serve and learn, to teach and to lead others. And that was my career. And here in Waco, it's almost like you get in this groove, and it's almost like you're a business major. It's like, I need to connect with this person because I might get to do a guest sermon at this church. I'm on the church Instagram, or like I'm getting what, and you would notice that from like talking to other people. It's like, what can I get from you? Oh, nothing. Okay, well, it's good to see you, man. God bless you. Let me know if you want to be a part of my small group or something. Blah 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 blah. You get in that mindset, and at the time, I loved that. It wasn't everything. I did and still do love the Lord and wanted to serve him, but it looks a little bit different now. And I've freed, God has freed me from that need to do things on front and center.
How did he do that? How did he free you?
He humbled me to my core. I was so embarrassed that I was let go. I had told so many people that I had this residency lined up. And so many people were proud of me. So many people were like, dude, that's awesome. Like, it felt amazing. And then that was taken from me because of my actions, but that was taken from me. And so here I am with a college degree, getting ready to work on my master's degree, and I don't have a job. My buddy is working at Common Grounds, a coffee shop right next to Baylor. He's like, hey man, you can come work here as you find your way. Man, I was so embarrassed to have a college degree and working at a coffee shop, but I did it for a year and a half. And there would be, a coffee shop is like the town square for Pharisees and ministers and just it's a place where you can go and truly serve the Lord, but it's also a place that you can go and flaunt yourself, whether that be in the ministry world or not. You can be, people will look at you. People are a lot more inclined to stare at coffee shops. And so I would be serving them coffee, and they would be having discipleship meetings, but I wasn't allowed to have those because I wasn't allowed to serve. And so I chose, at the time, it was a process, but I chose not to serve God at all. I chose not to serve him at all, and I would bring, I stopped using cannabis right there, but I didn't have my contract anymore with alcohol, so I started using alcohol again. I would bring a bottle of whiskey in my backpack and like put it underneath the register and like, sneak it in my drinks, because I wanted to numb myself from that feeling of embarrassment. And what really took me out of that was I had a coworker who, when we started working together, was an atheist. And she would ask me questions about God. And I didn't want to talk to her about it because I was still so bitter. But she kept asking me. And now I look back and I'm like, Hayden, what were you doing? Like, you had an opportunity to advance the gospel here, and you just, pouted about it. Really? So a couple months go by, and she's really like, I had never like led someone to Christ. That's crazy. I had never led someone to Christ. The only people that I interacted with were believers. It's kind of hard to find an atheist unless you're looking. If you're looking to start an argument, you know, if you're just being nice, it was kind of hard for me to find an atheist. But she kept asking me these questions and was genuinely curious. And I finally am like, just giving her the bare minimum. Not actively trying to reach her. But God used me in my, like, I'm disgusted with how I was acting at the time, but used me in that negative, pouty mindset. And she asked me, like, hey, like, she grabbed me. We were at the drive-thru, and there was a line of cups, like, stacked so far back. We were so busy. I was so annoyed with her. She grabbed me and was like, hey, I want to know Jesus. Can you please tell me about him? I had never done that before. And here I am in the busiest, you know, pumpkin spice is on full blast. We're going. And I'm like, all right, can you stand right here and prep these drinks? And like, I just get in the zone and I'm making espresso as fast as I can, telling her about Jesus and how he died and resurrected for our sins. And if you choose to follow him with everything that you have, you know, you can be a part of God's kingdom and your life will change forever. And I'm saying this and I'm literally preaching to myself. And it was in that moment that I realized that I had tried to exalt myself for so long. And then I was humbled. And I don't even want to take credit for humbling myself because of my attitude when she asked me to share Christ with her. That was only by the mercy of God. That was only by the mercy of God that I was able to reach her to Christ. My heart posture was not there. And God humbled me and gave me enough grace so that I could start humbling myself. And that's when I started to be exalted. And not in a way that people in the world could see me, but in a way that I wanted to be the hands and feet of Christ in common grounds. This is my church right now. This is where I'm serving God. I can't serve God in a church building, but I am qualified to serve God right here. And to this day, God has used me to be a part of leading 2 people to Christ outside of that circumstance. And both of them were in that building.
What do you think God thinks about you? Like if he came and sat down next to you, what do you think he would say to you?
He would say, Hayden, you want to be understood. You want to be seen. I see you. I understand you. I created you. You're made in my image. Why are you caring about what these people think? Your goal should be to focus on me, and we can do this together. And I know you want me to be proud of you. That's what you want more than anything. You want your father to be proud of you. And I'm proud of you.
I know your story's not over, but where would you say you're at in your story?
Well, now my full-time job as a social worker, I am recruiting community volunteers to spend time with our students, and I see that as a ministry role, as a leadership role. It's not a church leadership role, but I'm still doing it. And my job now is to connect an adult with a child that has similar interest or strengths that combine them in some way. And I watch them make that connection, and then I step away and watch God do the work. And now, every day I wake up and I'm striving to be humble, to have a humble heart, so that God can use these people for His glory. And my job is to connect them. And I'm okay with that. And not only that, I'm so blessed that God is merciful to me and that He loves me enough. And I don't need the approval of man to feel joy and to serve God. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in and sharing, Hayden. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man.
Hello, friend. Thank you so much for being here. The heart of these videos is to show the world that you are never too far gone from God's love. If you want to support what we're doing, click the link in the description. Thanks for being here.